sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is David Cobb. He is the North Coast Regional Director of the California Public Banking Alliance. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on.
Howdy. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, David, we've been talking about public banks on this show for quite a bit. I talked to a gentleman from Philadelphia that I was telling you about. They're trying to get something going there. It seems like they're like one vote away from that happening. I want to start from the very beginning for people who may be new and may not be aware of what a public bank actually is. So let's start there. How would you describe a public bank?
Well, Sabby, it's a great question. And I'm not being coy and I'm not being a smart aleck when I say a public bank is a bank owned by the public, right? I mean, literally, that is at its fundamental core. It is like private banks are owned by private individuals and they operate at a profit. They are a profit motive institution. And a public bank actually is a bank that does not have to return profit or a return on investment to shareholders, and so therefore can actually operate in the public good. And I'll take this opportunity to take one step back and say straight up, I am by practice and theory a revolutionary. I believe we have to restructure this entire society because our current society is fundamentally racist. It's fundamentally sexist. It's fundamentally class oppressive. And as if that shit's not bad enough, and I know from your show, you and your guests and your audience know that's terrible, right? But let's be clear, the current social, political, and economic institutions are literally going to destroy this planet. Yep. So I say that because I want to be crystal clear. Public banks are non-reformist reforms, which is to say, we can win public banks right now. They are in what social movement people call Overton's window, right? They're the things that are capable of being won right now, and done properly, they can undermine white supremacy. They can undermine capitalism. They are a way to begin to transform and democratize economics itself.
Well said. And there is a public bank in this country that you guys have, if you're older members of the show, you've heard me refer to this before, the Bank of North Dakota, which I feel like more people need to know about. And I want to hear a little bit about this bank from you, David, because what some people may not realize is that when the 2008 housing crisis happened, North Dakota actually did not suffer at the same extent as other states because they had a public bank. So they didn't take the same type of hit that other states took. But I want you to tell everyone a little bit about the Bank of North Dakota.
Well, I'm so glad you went right to the Public Bank of North Dakota, because it actually shows that a public bank can operate in the current system, right? Because like, I don't have to tell your listeners or your viewers that public bank is not, or North Dakota is not exactly a hotbed for communists and Reds and revolutionaries, right? Like, right. It is a politically and culturally very conservative place, and yet they have a public bank. Now, Sabby, it's worth pointing out that public bank is over 100 years old and is the result of the very progressive populist uprising that swept this country 100 years ago. But the Public Bank of North Dakota operates, again, for the public interest. It offers basic checking and saving accounts and other retail banking to North Dakota residents. It also, because of the unique structure of the state-owned public bank, the public bank does not compete with the private sector for retail deposits. So it provides a service for both individual retailers and can be available for small ranchers and small farms. So the plan of how the savings account works is a way to show that you can democratize a finance, and the public bank again has been successful for over 100 years in this country.
That's right. A friend of mine actually had moved to North Dakota a couple of years ago for work. And he said he was paid very, very well. And he said he made this statement that, like, in North Dakota, they have more jobs than people. But what he noticed, like moving there from North Carolina, they did not seem to have some of the same issues that we had, like in North Carolina at that time, because one of the reasons, again, they had that public bank. So even when we look at something like Medicare for all, and there's this debate about whether or not this should happen on the national level or we should try through the states. Well, one of the pushback criticisms that we get in reference to trying to do this through the states is that who's going to pay for it, right? Like, you still have to get the funding approved by the federal government. But I'd say the way that you can push back on that is by having a public bank. So a state like North Dakota, I think, would be a great place to start for something like Medicare for all. Now, I'm not sure if residents in North Dakota would want that, would want Medicare for all, but it's just something that people should think about, I think.
Well, and look, that's a very good point. And what you're underscoring is that if we had a public bank, we democratize finance. And so it allows those kinds of decisions to be made. Now, we already talked about it, Sabby. The reality is that North Dakota ain't a hotbed for liberal progressives or revolutionaries. So sadly, you might have a hard time convincing them to do a public bank. But I'll tell you, here in California, where we have passed landmark legislation to allow the creation of up to 10 local or regional public banks, it's being driven by affordable housing advocates, climate justice activists. So there are a whole group of folks who are absolutely considered on the left, who are at the cutting edge in the forefront of advocating for public banks, precisely because we see it as a way to be able to finance and fund the kind of social change that we support.
That's right. And this is a good point here by Roger. Thank you so much for this. North Dakota is number 51 in homelessness. Wonder why? Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Again, thank you, Roger, for that, because I'll tell you, it's not just homelessness. But in addition to that, as Sabby very accurately pointed out, during the housing crisis, they had what I think it was they were one of the fewest number of foreclosures. And during the meltdown of 2008, in addition to that, while other states were suffering massive credit crunches, North Dakota did not suffer there as well. And again, I'm not saying for a minute that public banks are the end all be all, but what I'm saying is they are a profound improvement over our existing economy. And Sabby, if we actually had public banking and worker-owned cooperatives and participatory budgeting and universal basic income and community land trust to take both housing and land off of the commodity market, we could literally begin a peaceful revolution, democratizing the economy within the current system. And that's why I am, even though I am a self-proclaimed revolutionary, I do the work of public banking because I see it as a mechanism for the deeper transformational change we so desperately need in this country.
Well said. This is a great question by Douglas. Credit unions. What's your opinion about that? Do you feel that credit unions are just as good as a public bank, or do you feel like it's still a part of that private sector in a sense?
Well, it's a great question, and I would you asked the question well. Is it as good as a public bank? No. Is it better than Wall Street banks? You bet. The way I actually encourage people is to think about it this way. The absolute worst way to do banking is big mega Wall Street banks, right? So better than Wall Street banks are, locally run or so-called community banks, but they're still banks and they still have shareholders. Credit unions are way better than banks, right? Because credit unions are actually operating on the benefit of the members themselves. So credit unions are definitely better than banks. But Sabby, here's the thing. credit unions are almost exclusively for what are known as personal lines, right? So if you go into the whole model of how credit unions operate are for personal banking only, right? So that means, home mortgages or auto or, boats, that sort of thing. Very personalized banking services. And that's how the business model works. And it's because there are federal restrictions on what credit unions can or cannot do. So what are known as commercial lines, right? So for the big, massive infrastructure projects, credit unions can't work. They just can't handle that kind of money. And as an example of that, I can tell you the creation of the California Public Banking Alliance, many of us came to public bankings from Standing Rock. Why? Because so many of us had actually been part of the movement of divest, right? Divest from Wall Street, invest in our local communities. And we had some success in a couple of places. Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, where we had elected officials say, okay, we're willing to consider it. Where should we go? And the rallying cry was credit unions. Yep. And what I and others found out is the credit unions cannot handle the billions of dollars that a major the city of Seattle, for example, which was the first place that we really started to get some traction, where we thought we're going to get one. We're going to divest out of Wells Fargo. Sabby, we couldn't find a credit union that would take it. And that's where I began my learning journey. Oh, credit unions are not the answer. They're good. I bank at Gulf Coast Coast Central Credit Union, right? So I'm a member of a credit union. I'm a supporter, but credit unions are not enough. Public banks are different because they can handle the massive infrastructure projects, which is one of the reasons that I want to really underscore what's so exciting. Here's something, and I want to challenge because I've seen your show before, right? You've got a very active, engaged video audience and listener / viewership, right? Do the research. When we think about the big, massive public infrastructure projects, like big bridges or roads or big sewer systems, right? These are often hundreds of million dollars, sometimes billions of dollars of projects. Check this out, Sabby. About 40% of the actual cost of all of those big infrastructure projects, 40% of it is the cost of the privilege of borrowing money. In other words, it's not actually the payment of the materials. It's not the payment of the wages. It's not the administration. It's literally just the privilege of borrowing money. It's a scam. It's a racket. So a public bank for a infrastructure project can literally save taxpayers off the top about 40% of the cost of every public infrastructure project.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Now, you're a part of the California Public Banking Alliance. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm really excited to tell you that that we are, with the passage of our bill, we became the first state in the union in over 100 years to allow a process to charter public banks. Now, a charter is just like, I'm a lawyer by training, right? A charter is just the birth certificate for an entity, right? That's what an incorporation actually means. So, Sabby, and I also I have a practice of being humble and telling on myself when it's appropriate. So I'll say, when we first started the movement for public banking in California, our desire was a public bank for the state of California, right? A true public bank for the state of California. And our bill was introduced. We had champions in the legislature, and it was in the first session in 2019 was introduced. So about several months into the legislative session back in 2019, the Representative Santiago and Chu came to us and said, hey, y'all, this is actually getting some traction. And I think that we could act like, and Governor Newsom has indicated interest. If we change this bill, amend it to, instead of being a public bank for the state of California, and instead make it a pilot project to allow the creation of up to 10 local or regional public banks as basically model or pilot projects, I think that we could get this passed. And Sabby, I got to say, all of my colleagues had the reaction you did. Their eyes got big. They were like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And I said, oh no, we should not do that. We've just begun. We should not negotiate with ourselves before the real fight happened. We'll never get this passed in 1 year, so we should fight for what we're for. This is a long struggle. We shouldn't give up. And everybody, basically the rest of the leadership, all disagreed with me. So in my organizing culture, we've got to practice. Disagree, but commit, right? So I said, all right, I disagree with y'all, but you're my comrades. So I am going to disagree, but I commit to working hard to make this happen. But I just want everybody on the record to note, I said we should not make this compromise. And believe me, all my colleagues love to occasionally remind me, hey, David, remember when you wanted it on the record not to compromise? Because they were right. I was wrong. We made a compromise. And in one legislative session, we got all the way through the state assembly. We got it through the state Senate. Governor Newsom signed it. We are now going through the process. And now what we have is a genuinely good-natured cooperative competition to see who will be the municipality to have the first public bank in California. And I'm here to tell you, it's not going to be here in little old rural Humboldt County. It will either be Los Angeles or San Francisco or East Bay, basically Oakland and the East Bay, or Sacramento. There are 4 places where, and we imagine being in competition with a group of people who are literally coming together and sharing best practices, right? So when I say good-natured cooperative competition, the California Public Banking Alliance operates in exactly that way. The difference is in California, because we did it, it's not a statewide public bank, it's a local or regional one, and it's not a personal lines bank. It would only, the depositors could only be the city or county government or fire districts or school districts or so forth, right? I mean, does that make sense? I hope I'm not getting too much in the weeds, but I think it's important to note that as an organizer myself, I'm a very opportunistic organizer, Sabby. Like, I'm a revolutionary. I believe in theory, but I also know this. As soon as Fred Hampton said, theory's cool and all, but without a practice, it ain't shit, right? Like, you've got to actually put things into practice. And as soon as you put it into practice, you've got to be willing to adapt, make moves, and so forth. So we in California are eager to work with other people at the state level or at the local level. You mentioned Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is right on the cusp. There's some exciting things going on in Philadelphia. I shared with you the state of Massachusetts. There's some exciting, like, the public banking movement is growing. And I think that what makes California unique is, and I say this, without false modesty or false immodesty, we've actually got legislation through. We are now working with the state regulators for how to promulgate the rules associated with what that public banking is going to be. And it's very exciting in California.
I am very surprised that Gavin Newsom was on board for this, because he is definitely corporate, usually in the pocket of big banks. So I'm very surprised that he approved it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'll tell you, Gabby, Sabby, I'm so glad you said that, because look, just to be clear, y'all, I'm a Green Party member. I ain't no Democrat. And I believe that the Democratic Party leadership are controlled by the neoliberals. And they, the neoliberal, for the most part, would rather have Republicans in office than people like us, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to be very clear. I came into this with very clear understanding. part of the reason why I did not want to like buy into this, like, oh, we can get it passed and Newsom would sign it, because I didn't trust him, right? So let me answer the question then that you answered. Why do I think that happened, Sabby? I think it happened the same reason that you're seeing a renewed interest in worker-owned cooperatives and community land trusts and participatory budgeting. Answer: because capitalism is failing. We're not just in late stage capitalism. This is end stage capitalism, Sabby. Like, literally, I think that what we are finding is a lot of people who would never give somebody like me or you or your viewers and listeners the time of day. Frankly, they're getting desperate and they're seeing fascism rise and they're willing to try things they were never willing to try before. I don't think for a minute that Gavin Newsom is a genuine progressive. He's damn sure no radical, right? He is, in fact, a friend of Wall Street, but I think that he was willing to try some things because there is a level of desperation. The housing crisis is acute. The global climate crisis and the sea level rise. Like, Gavin Newsom is a politician who is willing to try some things. Make no mistake about it, he's not, quote, on our side, but he was willing to try something. That's all.
Do you think part of this could have to do with the fact of the mass exodus of people from California? Like, a lot of people have been leaving California also.
You know, that's a good point. I gotta admit, I had not actually thought that through. And one thing you'll learn about me is like I have to think about that. Like, I don't know. I hadn't really. I'll say, when you say it, it's like, damn, I hadn't thought about that. But it has the ring of, yeah, that makes sense. So I guess my answer to your question is, do I think it could be? I damn sure think it could be. I'd have to think through a little bit. But that has the ring of, yeah, I bet that was probably part of it too.
Yeah, the very first, for people who are newer, the very first interview I did on this show 2 years ago, it was a girl named Brittany. She's a YouTuber, but she does like vlogs. She actually was a part of that mass exodus. And so I brought her on to talk about that, like why she left California. And she kind of brought to my attention that a lot of people were leaving California and moving to states like Texas and Arizona. And she did both. So she left California, moved to Arizona, and then settled in Texas, where she'd been recently. But she brought to my attention like a lot of the economic problems that people are experiencing in California. She told me, like, growing up in California, and she's from there, and it's not often you meet someone who's actually from LA, and she's from there. And she said that growing up there, it was never realistic to think that you would ever be able to buy a house. So these are some of the things that people, I think California residents are dealing with. It's a state that has a lot of movie stars and musicians, whereas it seems like a lot of people there are making just enough to get by, but not get ahead.
I mean, I think that's exactly right, Sabby. And I can tell you, the housing crisis in California is acute, right? And getting worse. And it's going to continue to get worse, because I'll take one step back again and tell you, the global climate crisis is not coming, it's here, and it will get worse. And the economic crisis is not over. And in fact, capitalism can't solve the economic crisis, because capitalism is the root of the economic crisis. And that capitalism's crisis is actually twofold. One, it is destroying Mother Earth faster than we can replenish it. That's why capitalism can't be reformed. Ultimately, we're going to have to restructure our entire political economy. And deeper than just the existential crisis of the commodification problem, Sabby, with automation, robotics, the new technology, we're moving into laborless production. And the way capitalism always produces profits for the capitalist pig is by allowing them to extract the surplus value of the labor of the worker. See, the capitalist does not care about me or you or our families. They put us to work because they make money from us. That's literally like the whole idea of the surplus value of labor. They extract the surplus value of labor of the worker. Well, as we move into laborless production, the capitalist short term is, oh, yay, I don't have labor costs. But long term, they're not going to be able to extract the value there. And so this is what pisses me off. We should be living in paradise right now, right? There's enough to go around. If we addressed the class issue, and I don't mean socioeconomics, I mean true Marxist understanding of that there is a ruling class and a laboring class, right? And people, like, there's so many of these, I'll just call them idiot, populists who say, I'm a capitalist. And I'm like, do you own the means of production? Like, if you don't own the means of production, you might support capitalism, but you ain't no capitalist. There's a definition of that word. And that is the people who own the privately own the means of production. Sabby, here's the thing. What we're going to see is an acute worsening of the global ecological crisis, the economic crisis, and that's why fascism is rising. Because the political system cannot solve the problems now. And polarization is just going to get worse, right? And frankly, the neoliberal Democrats, they don't have a plan. That's why they're willing to look at things like public banks and participatory budgeting. And again, those are just reforms. Remember, I'm a non-reformist reformer. I'm willing to fight like hell for reforms to make people's lives better, but you will not satisfy me with merely having public banks. I want to democratize the entire economy. I want to abolish the billionaire class. I want to restructure society. And I believe that public banks are a mechanism, a way to begin that process.
Well said. So California Public Banking Alliance, I want to make sure I put the website up here on the screen for people so they can see this as well. This initiative is gaining a lot of steam. Like I know like other people have reached out to me about this as well. And I want to make sure people in the audience are aware. California Public Banking Alliance, we are a coalition of public banking activists working to create socially and environmentally responsible city and regional public banks. Publicly owned, local, ethical banking. Eric, can you put the link to this in the chat? And what I like about this is that you also have the legislation here, so people can read the legislation for themselves. I've talked to so many people, they've come on and they said, well, yeah, this bill passed, but if I go to the website, I don't have access to read the legislation. So I think it's really important that you guys actually have that information here on the site and donating. If you want to help support the California Public Banking Alliance, we can put this link in the chat as well, Eric, because they do need the funds to keep this going and to win. And I also want to ask, in reference to the friendly competition that you were referring to, I think that is a phenomenal idea. That makes sense. It motivates people more. Like, not to say there wasn't motivation initially, there is, but it puts that extra oomph in your step, so to speak, and says, well, yeah, I want to beat this region. So guys, let's go ahead and get it together. I thought that was a great idea.
And Sabby, again, like, so it's competition, but it's friendly competition, right? In other words, it's like we literally meet the leadership of our various cities. If you take a look at that website, viewers, if you go to that website that Sabby just put up, you'll see here are the alliance cities. And I think we're up to 12 local. We're like a confederation, right? About 35 of us are on monthly calls together, and we're literally sharing, here's where we are in our lobbying effort. Here are the talking points that we're using. Like, we literally, there you go, there's the photo, right? Look at all those different cities, right? So once a month, we come together, we support each other, we're spurring each other on. But believe you me, when I say there is a competition to be first, there is absolutely, it's a friendly competition, but it is absolutely a competition to try to see who gets to be the first public bank locally in California.
That is awesome. And also, those of you, if you're interested, I know quite a bit of you live in California. If you're interested in joining, there's also information here for that as well. And also, are you interested in starting or joining a public banking campaign in your city or region? So definitely go to this site, guys, because I know we've talked about the possibility of trying to start something like that here as well. Here's your resources. You know, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If the wheel is already there, you can piggyback off of this. So thank you so much as well, David. I think it's important that you put that in for, or maybe not just you, but that information is also put on the website as well, because I think a lot of times, you know, people have come on and they've talked about what's happening in their city, but then the question is like, okay, so how do we do that where we live? So right. I think it's great that that's there.
I want to add, because I know we're coming to the end of the segment. So I'll say, if you live in California, the California Public Banking Alliance, there is a national public banking movement. But if you contact us, absolutely, we will get, like, you don't have to be in California. If you're in California, we can get you plugged in to any local effort if you live someplace where there already is one. And if there's not, we'll help you start one in your local area. But if you live in a different area, we can get you in touch with and network you into other places. Because at the end of the day, the only way that we're going to actually be able to overcome the ruling class in this country is if we unite and fight together.
That's right. David, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, it was my pleasure. And I want to give a shout out to Roger and to all the folks who put you on my radar. Because I will say, and I want to congratulate you, because you just got a milestone, didn't you? Right? Pretty recently, a number of subscribers.
I did. Thank you.
Say it out loud. Come on. You got to learn to promote yourself.
I can't do it, David.
Do
it. 40K, guys. Woo!
40,000 subscribers, y'all. That is a big deal. It shows that people's media works. So I want to thank you again, Sabby, for this opportunity. It's been my distinct pleasure to be your guest. And you should have me on again, because I want to talk about worker-owned cooperatives and the Indigenous Community Land Trust. Like imagine that. People who have revolutionary rhetoric who also get shit done.
That's right. Thank you so much, David.
Bye now.
All right, guys. Lots of information there. Definitely share this with people, guys. I know a lot of people have questions about public banking, but what I really did like about the California Alliance is that they don't just tell you about what they're doing on that website. They also have information for how you could start something like this in your own city. So I think that's important. You know, a lot of times we hear from people what they're doing, but they don't tell you how to do it. And I think that piece is very important. Okay. Lots to discuss tonight, guys. Let's go ahead and we'll shout out patrons, shout out the thumbnail, and then we'll go to some of the comments in the chat and Rockfin, and then we will dive right in. So first and foremost, shout out to all of you who are Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about the Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you, patrons in his house. Okay, so what else are we going to discuss tonight, guys? We do have some interesting stories. We do kind of have a theme of finance tonight. That wasn't really on purpose, but it seems like it's going in that direction because we're also going to talk about that in reference to Professor Wolff and the Supreme Court decision as well. So tonight, we are also going to discuss Professor Richard Wolff, U.S. dollar. He has warning bells for all of us. We're also going to talk about that AOC Town Hall. I finally got all the videos that I needed for that. That's why I hadn't covered that yet. Getting a lot of pushback on that town hall. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss Lula meets Maduro. This is serious. I don't know if people realize how significant this meeting is, and we're going to talk about that and what that could mean for other countries in South America. We're also going to discuss Scotus unions, the decision that was made by the Supreme Court in reference to labor unions, and you all need to know about that. And we're going to explain next steps from that as well. And of course, David was just here to talk about public banks. Hope you guys learned something from that discussion. Okay, thank you so much for the super chat, Roger. Public banks ensure community banks and CUs replace the FDIC. And thank you for the super chat as well. It's more important to get it right than to be first to do it. I agree with that as well. And I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. First and Second U.S. Bank was the first national public bank used to win the Revolutionary War and the 1812 War. Lincoln's Greenback Bank was used to build railroad infrastructure to win the Civil War. FDR used the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, a national public bank created by Hoover, to launch his infrastructure projects. 2018, America's Samoan Islands got permission from the U.S. to charter their own public bank. Interesting. Little bit of history for you guys. Little bit of history. Okay, we are going to dive into our first story. So, breaking news, Lula has met with Maduro from Venezuela. For those who are not aware, this is huge news. This is actually very significant. It's not likely that something like this would have happened a couple of years ago. But what was that meeting about, and what does this mean for the future of South America? I want to go to this clip here from OWN. They are discussing this meeting and also the fact that Lula is calling out the U.S. government for putting sanctions on Venezuela. Listen to this.
Massive paradigm shifts are afoot in South American politics. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is visiting Brazil for the first time since he was banned by the former far-right president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, in 2019. President Lula da Silva of Brazil urged Maduro to build a new narrative. The new bridges with Brazil enable a new acceptability for the thus far isolated leader. Maduro was received by the fellow leftist Brazilian leader, Lula da Silva, ahead of a summit of Latin American leader in Brasilia. This is Venezuela's president's first visit to Brazil after a nearly 4-year period of hostility.
So this is one of the reasons why this meeting is so significant, because he hasn't been to Brazil in, they said, four years. Now, let's keep it real. Obviously, U.S. leaders are not happy that this meeting took place. And there are other leaders in the West that are also not happy that this alliance is happening here. Just the fact that Lula is simply meeting with Maduro, and we'll get into the reasons about that as well. But you can bet the Biden administration is not happy that this went down. You can bet.
During bilateral talks, Maduro said a new era is opening up between the two countries and that the two nations must be united from now on and always.
So that piece was important, that the two nations must be united. This part, I'll put captions up actually, because they have a lot of spacing in between there. When they're doing their commentary, they have a lot of gaps in between. Here we go.
Must be united from now on and always.
There you go.
Se abre una nueva época en las relaciones entre nuestros países, entre nuestros pueblos. Y en esa nueva época debe corresponder entonces la construcción de un nuevo mapa de cooperación, de trabajo conjunto que abarque todas las áreas.
All right, let me read what he's saying. We go back here just a little bit so you can understand what's... Okay, here we go.
Se abre una nueva época en las relaciones.
A new era is opening up in the relations between our countries, between our peoples, and this new
entre nuestros países, entre nuestros pueblos. Y en esa nueva época debe corresponder entonces la
And this new era must include the construction of a new map of cooperation, of joint work that
construcción
encompasses
de un nuevo mapa de cooperación, de trabajo conjunto que abarque todas las áreas.
all areas. So here you have Lula and Maduro reaching some type of partnership or alliance, so to speak. Yeah, buddy. I told you it's getting hot. It's getting hot in Brazil.
In a sign that ties between both the nations are solid, Lula da Silva called out the US sanctions on Venezuela as quote-unquote extremely exaggerated. Lula's warm embrace of the Venezuelan president just ahead of the meeting drew a lot of pushback from some of the neighboring countries and also threatened the sense of unity that the Brazilian president was seeking.
Right. So Lula is saying that the sanctions that the U.S. government has on Venezuela are exaggerated and that they should end. Obviously, here you see that he's getting pushback for having this meeting with Maduro. Let's go on. Okay. They could work on their transitions a little bit. I mean, thank you guys for the news, but you can work on your transitions a little bit. Anywho, let's move on because I have an article I want to go to in reference to this as well. So this is coming from U.S. News. Maduro and Lula hit out as U.S. sanctions on Venezuela. So let's get into this. And I want you guys to think about what this could mean for the future of BRICS as well. I want to make this bigger. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and Brazilian leader Lula on Sunday assailed U.S. sanctions against Venezuela, and Maduro said he hopes a regional South American summit in Brazil will call for their removal. Lula called the U.S. sanctions extremely exaggerated and criticized the U.S. for denying the legitimacy of fellow leftist Maduro, who is considered by Washington an authoritarian leader who has not allowed free elections. Maduro was on his first visit to Brazil since 2015, taking advantage of warmer relations before 11 South American presidents met in Brazil on Tuesday. We're going to get into that as well. The Venezuelan president also said his country wants to be part of the BRICS group of leading emerging nations, which Lula said he would personally favor. So, now I told you there were other countries that wanted to join BRICS. Now you have Maduro himself, who many in the West have feared, saying that he also wants to join BRICS. How do you think that would go? Do you think that the U.S. government would see BRICS as even more of a threat than they do now if Venezuela joined BRICS? Brazil's former hard-right president, Bolsonaro, had banned Maduro from entering Brazil when he took office in 2019, a measure that Lula lifted when he returned to power this year. We are living in a historic moment. It's hard to believe so many years went by with no dialogue with a neighbor with whom we share the Amazon region. That's coming from Lula. Among the issues on their agenda was a large debt Venezuela has run up with Brazil's National Development Bank, Brazilian officials have said. Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando was due to meet with Maduro and Lula, and the president of state-run oil company Petrobras, Jean-Paul Prates. Lula said he argued with the United States and fellow social democrats over Maduro's legitimacy and the 900 sanctions Venezuela faces. I think it is really absurd that they deny that Maduro is the president of Venezuela. The South American presidents, all except Peru, will discuss the launch of a cooperation bloc in place of the defunct UNASUR, which was created in 2008 during the previous presidency of Lula, with the leftist leaders at the time of Venezuela and Argentina, Hugo Chavez and Cristina Kirchner, respectively. The organization floundered, with several South American countries elected right-wing governments, creating diplomatic fixtures on the continent. The world is changing. We've talked about BRICS. We've talked about China and Brazil trying to move away from the US dollar. And this is going to actually transfer over into the Richard Wolff story. This is all connected. But the world that we have known economically, globally, things are starting to change. And we're starting to see a shift in the power structure and the different dynamics. We are seeing other countries rise up and say that they want to be at the world stage and they don't really want to follow the lead of the US government anymore. Is there a point when it comes to BRICS where there are certain leaders or certain countries where there should be a hard red line, where there should be a hard no? Is Venezuela one of those countries that should not be allowed to join BRICS? And if that's the case, is there any type of line? Now, I want to show you something here from Human Rights Watch, because they bring up interesting points, but there's one crucial piece that they leave out in reference to Venezuela and this meeting that Lula had. It says Brazil's Lula misses crucial chance to uphold rights in Venezuela. So pay attention. This is Human Rights Watch. So that's what they're going to focus on, but it's important to see what they actually leave out. That's the part I think that really got me. I don't know if this can get any bigger. Okay, there we go. After meeting with Nicolas Maduro this week, Brazil's President Lula implied that democracy is thriving in Venezuela and called for, no, this is way too small. I guess it's just their text. Yeah, it's just, okay, that's better. Okay, where was I? Did I lose where I was? Okay. After meeting with Maduro this week, Brazil's President Lula implied that democracy is thriving in Venezuela and called the undermining of diplomatic institutions there a constructed narrative. As someone who recently survived efforts to overthrow Brazil's democracy, it was frustrating to see him fawning over Venezuela's repressive ruler. It is no secret that the Maduro government had seized control of Venezuela's legislature and subordinated the judiciary. Election monitors have documented conditions undermining the fairness and transparency of recent elections. There have been 15,700 politically motivated arrests since 2014, with more than 280 political detainees being held now. Human Rights Watch and Venezuelan organizations have documented crackdowns on protesters, torture of detainees, and prosecutions of civilians in military courts. The International Criminal Court prosecutor has opened an investigation into such crimes. President Lula likely knows all of this. Maduro's government has also spurred one of the largest migration crises in the world. 7.2 million Venezuelans have fled since 2014, close to 6 million to other Latin American and Caribbean countries, including Brazil. The United Nations has reported that undernourishment in Venezuela is highest in the region, affecting 6.5 million people. Human Rights Watch has documented the collapse of Venezuela's health system. Now, they do a good job of mentioning some of the issues that are happening in Venezuela, which are considered to be human rights issues. But what they do not do in this article, they don't link it back to the bigger picture, and that is the U.S. government. Not once in this article. What is the U.S. government's role in reference to Venezuela? When they mention that this is a migration crisis that goes all the way back to 2014, well, that was under Obama's administration, right? Starting under a Democrat president. So if you're going to point out that they have a migration crisis, and you point out the crimes that are happening there, and you also mention how the people are being treated there, but you conveniently leave out the fact that the U.S. government has had a hand in this, I see that as a problem. Why are people, that's right, Desert Mantis, sanctions will do that to a country. That's right. Why are people in this situation to begin with? And this is not to sugarcoat Maduro. But why are these things happening? Other than the fact that they had Maduro as a leader, why else are these things happening? Who supplied the arms to people in Venezuela? Where'd all the weapons come from? How can they not mention it? Let's go on. Various world leaders have met with President Maduro in recent months and positioned themselves to play a mediating role in any negotiations towards the restoration of democracy. But by parroting the Maduro government talking points, President Lula aligned himself with Maduro's authoritarian allies and missed a chance to help lead Venezuela out of a massive humanitarian and human rights crisis. If I remember correctly in the previous video, Lula said they need to end the sanctions on Venezuela. So we want to talk about the humanitarian crisis, and to lead them out of that, the first step would be to end the sanctions on Venezuela, which Lula did mention. At this week's meeting in Brazil, Presidents Lecalpu of Uruguay and Gabriel Boric of Chile, leaders from opposite ideological ends took aim at Lula's comments. President Boric said the suffering of the Venezuelans was a reality, not a construct, and that he had seen it in his eyes of the hundreds of thousands taking refuge in Chile. President Lula should pursue every chance to restore the leadership his ill-considered comments undermined and fulfill his promise to lead on human rights worldwide. The Venezuelan emergency and the migration crisis it has generated will continue to be an important topic wherever South American leaders meet. President Lula should show support to the Venezuelan people, the political prisoners, the threatened journalists, the sick and hungry, the migrants and refugees, and seize every opportunity to reframe his stance on Venezuela. So this is not to say these examples that they're mentioning in this article are false. This is not to say that. But I feel like they don't link it back to the root cause. Not once do they even mention the U.S. government. Again, this is Human Rights Watch. So we have to, when we talk about this particular issue, we have to bring that back up. We have to link it back to that. Now, to go off of what they said in that article about this meeting with other leaders in South America, yes, 12 leaders in South America met all in one place for the first time in 9 years. Is this a sign of what is to come? Let's get into it.
It's been a long time coming, 9 years since leaders of South America's 12 countries gathered face to face. Host President Lula da Silva described it as an overdue and urgent encounter to build a regional bloc that can demonstrate strength through unity.
Together we have a $4 trillion GDP. Together we are the fifth global economy. We have 450 million consumers and the biggest and most diversified energy potential in the world.
Brazil's president outlined 15 initiatives for discussion behind closed doors, including highway, energy, and trade integration, and a single South American currency for continental commerce. Brazil favors...
That piece right there is very important, you guys. The possibility of South American commerce. Let's go back a little bit.
And most diversified energy potential in the world.
Brazil's president outlined 15 initiatives for discussion behind closed doors, including highway, energy, and trade integration, and a single South American currency for continental commerce.
A single South American currency for continental commerce. Does everybody see what's happening? Lula is making moves. These leaders are not, they're doing their own thing. They're doing their own thing. And I like to talk about this because I want people to realize we have grown up in this country with, ever since I was a kid, the United States was the wealthiest country in the world, right? We are going into a time where things are going to change. And it's already starting with BRICS, etc. Who knows? Will these other countries in South America, will they join BRICS as well? Could you imagine South America having its own currency? Now, why is this important other than the effect that it could have on the US dollar? It's important because one of the things that I explained on this show before is that when we talk about exploitation of the workers, we can't just think about exploitation of the workers in the US. We have to think about it on a global level. And when you think about it globally, and you look at some of these countries that do have these social, democracies where everybody has health care, where everybody gets like a month off vacation, etc. While there may not necessarily be exploitation happening to their people in their country, usually there is exploitation happening somewhere else, and it usually happens in the global South. So if South America moves forward in having their own currency, that won't just have an impact on the US dollar. Think about how all these other countries that have been using workers for child labor, etc., in these countries in the global South, think about how that is going to affect everybody else that has been depending on the US dollar. Think about it. And it's just a first step. From this point, there could be implications with trade. Maybe they may start changing trade agreement. We don't know. We don't know. So we have to pay attention to what's going on.
Brazil favors reactivating UNASUR, the South American bloc he helped create 15 years ago, but that most countries abandoned when the political pendulum in the region swung from left to right.
Most agreements in South America, most advances of big issues in South America, they are constantly on a stop and go movement, because when there's ideological alignment, there's willingness to advance. When there isn't ideological alignment, the advance becomes much slower.
The presence of Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro, whom many consider authoritarian, became divisive. Streaming his own speech on social media, Uruguay's president minced no words.
Not all of us here have the same definition of what is respect for institutions, for human rights, and for democracy.
President Lula is also under fire.
Yeah, so even though Lula was able to gather all the leaders together in one place, they all met, that doesn't mean that all of them agree with what Maduro has been up to. That doesn't mean they all agree with him being there. but they all did agree to sit at the table and have a discussion.
As the head of the region's largest economy, he is clearly trying to recover the role he played during his last presidency as South America's natural leader. Yet right now he is being strongly criticized, both here at home and abroad, for his unequivocal support of Nicolás Maduro. But in the end, there was consensus on the need not to exclude anyone and to focus on what they have in common. If they succeed in laying the groundwork for continental integration, the biggest challenge will be to create a bloc that can survive the test of time.
They decided to come together and focus on what they do have in common and work on those issues and put the other ones to the side. Does that sound familiar to you? Isn't that what we talk about sometimes in reference to organizing? People coming together for one common goal or two common goals. People coming together for an anti-war movement, even though they may disagree on other issues. They were able to do that and put the other issues to the side. People in the United States, for the most part, a lot of people here have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. If you walk down the street and just walk up to a random person and say, hey, are you familiar with BRICS? How many people will know what you're referring to? Most people don't even know this is happening. Most people don't even know that there is this push to move away from the US dollar by China and Brazil. Most people don't even know. And that's the reality. But if you ask them things that are not as important, and this is the part that gets me, if you ask them things that are not as important, they can tell you who the most popular TikTok star is. They can tell you about drama that has happened between the housewives. They can tell you about drama that has happened between different celebrities. But most people right now have no idea what is happening in the rest of the world. And it's important that we pay attention. And when we get into this story next with Richard Wolff, you'll understand why it's important that we pay attention. This is the wake-up call to everybody. Big wake-up call. I'm going to go through some of the comments here. PB World said, I'd love to see Mexico join BRICS, USA's backyard. So that was mentioned at one point in time, but I never heard anything else from it. I read somewhere that they were interested, but nothing else after that. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. Economic sanctions. Mike says, Sabby, between the show and the call-in for like 3 hours last night, I don't know how you do it. Still great to see you doing the thing again. You're awesome. Oh, thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's funny. I used to work mad long hours, guys. Like it was no 40-hour work week for me, but yeah, I used to work mad long hours. I think I just got used to it. But Veronica, wow, common ground and no US in the room too. Yay. Things are happening. Zombie, a report I saw on the BBC, called it the so-called BRICS. The saltiness is palpable. People, it's funny. Vinta Cafe, most of my friends doesn't even know about the petrodollar and BRICS. You see what I mean? And Mike also says we're losing our place as a reserve currency. All empires end. This is true. Gamer says America is still the most propagandized country. That's 100% correct. And we're going to move into this story about Richard Wolff. Now, this is economic update. I used to cover this like weekly, and then other stories came about. There's been so many news stories. But Richard Wolff, he had a discussion on Democracy at Work, economic update, and he broke down 4 different issues. The one that we are going to start with is the US dollar and what is happening in the rest of the world. So let's go ahead and jump in there, because hopefully this is everyone's wake-up call. Hopefully.
Called dollar or de-dollarization of the world economy. What do I mean? After World War II, the global economy was so dominated by the United States that the United States currency, the US dollar, became the global currency. So, for example, central banks around the world, seeking to hold reserves that would give confidence to anybody doing business in the currency of that country.
Okay, this takes us back to the conversation that we just had with David Cobb about the public banking. So Richard Wolff is explaining the issue with the central banks. And remember, I've explained on the show before, we eventually have to break away from the central banking system. Look at what has happened, guys. The '08 housing crisis connected back to the central banks. The regional banks that fell this year, it's still connected right back to the central banking system. And this is why this is not going to withstand for a long time. And that's what David was trying to tell people earlier in the show. This is not long lasting. We cannot continue on this way. And that's why starting these public banks, I think, is going to be crucial as we move forward.
They would hold in reserve gold, the global value behind money at the time, and the dollar, which was deemed literally to be as good as gold, as valuable as gold. So central banks held reserves in gold and held reserves in US dollars. Something like 80–90% of global central banks' reserves were in dollars. Today, that number is less than half. Under 45% of the world's central bank's reserves are in US dollars. Gold, euros, Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, they are replacing, and they're not alone, they are replacing the US dollar.
There you go. You've probably heard this on this show 3 times now, maybe 4. Yeah, this is happening. They're making waves. They're moving forward. You know, there's also a focus where some people are moving more towards like crypto, Bitcoin, etc. I don't necessarily know if that is the answer either. With crypto, it's tricky because if it's not a stable coin, and some of them are. So like, for example, those of us who are on Rockfin, the currency or the crypto that Rockfin uses is a stable coin, right? So they use the Ray. You can convert the Ray to USDC. I don't want to get too in the weeds in this because some of you are like, what are you talking about? But yeah, they use like the Ray, and I convert the Ray to USDC, etc. But those are stable. Not all of them are. So that can be tricky as well. So I don't know. But I do know that globally, when it comes to the US dollar, we need to pay close attention because these things are changing. It could come to a point, maybe in our lifetime, where the US dollar just isn't worth much anymore. Then what? We'll go back to these economic update videos and see what Professor Wolff tried to warn us about.
And the pace of that replacement has accelerated, most of it happening in this century, that is, since the year 2000. But this is not all. The dollar is less and less used these days compared with 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 60 years ago. The dollar is much less used in international trade. Goods and services and investments moving from one country to another, often in the past, were handled with dollars. The world had to hold on to dollars. Businesses had to hold on to dollars all over the world because their regular business was conducted in dollars. Saudi Arabia took the initiative, with the support of the United States, in creating the so-called petrodollar.
Let's pause there before he gets into petrodollar. Gamer for Life hits the nail on the head here. I was just about to go into this. Yep, cash won't last forever, and the WEF wants all digital and card currency only. There is a Twilight Zone episode, and sorry for the younger peeps in the chat, and some of you may be like, what the hell is the Twilight Zone? But Twilight Zone, one of my favorite shows of all time. I never get tired of watching it. There was a Twilight Zone episode where they fast forward to the future. They got a couple of those, but this one in particular, there were a group of guys and they were trying to basically hibernate themselves with gold into these machines. And in the future, you know, when they wake up, they'll be rich, basically. There's more that goes in the episode. I don't remember everything. But what happens is when you go into the future, there is a couple that finds the one guy, because the other two guys, that one guy killed the other two guys and kept all the gold for himself. Anyway, in the future, there's a couple and they're on this flying car, kind of like the Jetsons. And they see this guy who obviously had been walking through the desert with gold. And they stop and they're like, oh, what happened to this guy? Obviously, he passed out, right? So they're like, what is this? And they pick up the gold and they say, or one of them says, I don't know. It seems like, oh, this at one point in time was actually worth something. Can you believe it? And that's how the episode ends. Now, I don't mean to get all Twilight Zone-y on you. Oh, cool, Sebastian. What's up? I'm Gen Z that love Twilight Zone. I don't mean to get all Twilight Zone-y on you, but that could happen. There may be a time where eventually this doesn't mean anything, where the US dollar isn't worth anything anymore. So when you see that different countries are starting to move to like, or trying to, you know, do different currencies, when you see that crypto has become more and more popular, and then you see where, like they mentioned, the WEF, they want to lead to more like a digital currency. Like, we have to wake up, people. There may come a point in time where the US dollar, maybe in our life, where it's not worth anything anymore.
An arrangement in which much of the world's trade of oil, a central source of energy, was conducted in dollars, paid by country A that needed to import oil to country B that needed to export it. And that, of course, meant that you had to keep dollars to buy and handle the energy requirements of your economy. More and more, literally every week now, announcements are made where countries, including Saudi Arabia, are changing over and trading oil for other currencies. China's currency, Europe's currencies, even the currencies of Asia, Africa, and Latin American countries.
And this is basically Saudi Arabia giving a big FU, middle finger, to the US government. Yeah, I know we have like this friendship type thing, but we're going to do our own thing. Like, could you imagine like right now, imagine the Biden administration sitting there thinking like, how dare you trade oil with other countries under different currency? I thought we had an agreement here that we would back each other up. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, is like, yeah, I changed my mind. Just simply like that, like, we decided to do something different. Change mind, change plans, change hands. Just like that. Just like that. Which is also why we should not depend on another country. But don't get me started with that.
And this has enormous consequences. The simplest one to understand is this. The United States has been subsidized by the world's use of its currency. One way to see it is to understand that when foreign countries send goods and services to the United States, wine from France, software programs from Japan, minerals and so forth from Asia and Africa and Latin America, and they pay for them with dollars, they're paying with a very cheap piece of green paper. Costs literally nothing. We get the fruits of labor. we get the creativity of the productive apparatus of the world for Americans to consume, for American businesses to use as inputs to their own production, and all we as a nation have to give in exchange is totally costless pieces of green paper, the dollar.
This also reminds me of resources and the fact that we just don't really produce anything here like we used to, at least not during like my grandparents' generation, where things were actually made in America. So we have gotten to the point where we do depend on other countries to get certain goods. And I said this before, like that was a mistake. It was a mistake for them to allow manufacturing to leave this country. Now, yeah, some of that has come back, but not in the way that it was before. And you never know what's going to happen. People can turn on you. Like I said, with Saudi Arabia, friend today, foe tomorrow. I mean, it can happen anytime. Someone else can come to them. Another country can come to them and offer them a better deal, something that's more in their favor. So we should never depend on that. And this is also why you need to move away from some of these resources that we're dependent on. Oil. We've been talking about this forever. Joe Biden administration, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican, they're still drilling. You cannot depend on this forever. And what we should have been doing over the past 15, 20 years is talking about a way to transition away from fossil fuels. And so to the point that right now, today, we would already be practicing those other alternative options. You don't just start the conversation now. Like, this makes no sense to me. We have been warned about this in reference to climate change. We've been warned about this for years. Ever since I was a kid, back then it was called global warming. I guess somewhere along the way, they decided that didn't sound too great. Let's make it sound a little bit more friendly. Climate change. But that's what it was called when I was growing up. So 20, 30 years ago, that discussion should have already begun. And right now in 2023, we would already practice that now. But what do I know? What do I know? And everybody else that we put in office, they're backed by these fossil fuel companies, and they just continue to drill. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican.
And then we get a double subsidy. Because, of course, as all the dollars go out to pay for all the goods we import, and those dollars accumulate in the banks, the private banks, the central banks of other countries, they don't want to hold on to a dollar that pays them no interest. They need to hold on to access to dollars. They need to be able to get those dollars because they need them to buy oil and to do the world's business. Yep. But they're not earning anything while they hold the dollars. So know what they do? They turn around and take those dollars and lend them to the United States government. They buy treasury bills. And thereby they fund the budget deficits of the United States. They enable the United States government to tax corporations and the rich much less than they otherwise would have to.
Yep.
It's a subsidy to corporations and the rich, as running the deficits always has been. That is the reality of the double benefit that the dollar as world currency once conveyed on the United States, but the United States is now losing that subsidy.
And the United States is losing other things too. This is very important. When I say that we have to teach people how to grow their own food, we need to do that. We need to do that. I've seen too many doomsday movies to not be like, you know, there may come a time when you may have to do that. Let's go on.
Losing the ability to borrow the way it once did. discovering that it's going to be harder to finance the deficits of the future U.S. government than it was in the past, because the dollars are not out there waiting anxiously to be lent to the U.S. government as their way of holding the dollar. What will we see in the place of the dollar? Well, basically, there's one of two things. Either the Chinese yuan, because China is the great other of the United States. The U.S. and its allies, that's G7. China and its allies, that's the BRICS.
So someone was asking me this a while back and they thought it was yuan. It is yuan. Yeah, I know. It's spelled yuan, but it's spelled like it would be yuan, but it is actually yuan. But yeah, yuan could replace the dollar. And I saw your comment here. I wanted to get to this as well, Bryce. This is a good point. When the yuan takes over, we will no longer be the world's police. Military spending will plummet. Ding, 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 ding. But one of the reasons why they don't want this to happen, the U.S. government doesn't want this to happen, and Marco Rubio let the cat out the bag, he didn't even try to keep it a secret, was because then the U.S. government wouldn't be able to put sanctions on countries anymore. That's another thing that would happen. That actually would prevent the U.S. government from sanctioning other countries. And then if you want to talk about being the world's police, once that's a wrap, that's it. That is it. And then think about how all those other countries that the U.S. government has sanctioned, if they're the ones that have a little bit more power this time around, think about how they may respond to the U.S.
But we're going to see a new currency replace the dollar, either the Chinese currency or, if they can do it, a composite, a new international currency that will be backed by a bunch of countries, not just by one. You know, we were used to the British pound during the British Empire being the global currency, and the US dollar being the global currency during the heyday of the American Empire. It will be an interesting question whether the emerging China/BRICS global dominance economically will make one or a basket of currencies function as the global exchange medium in the future.
You can make sure it'll be done in a way that works for those countries that are, have that alliance. Like it'll be done in a way so that the countries, maybe more so the countries that are part of BRICS, where it will benefit them in a way. And honestly, can you really be upset with them for that? Can you really be upset with them, I mean, what are they supposed to do? Just sit back and allow the U.S. to police them and continue to let that happen? Karma sucks. I don't know how else to put it, but karma, yikes.
Another dimension of the fast-changing world economy that I want to bring to your attention is the role of China in two basic ways. China is the emerging economic powerhouse. Everyone in the world who pays attention knows that. And one of the interesting ways in which China is playing this emerging powerful role is by becoming a global peacemaker. By far, the most dramatic evidence of that was the role of the Chinese in bringing together the bitter enemies, Iran and Saudi Arabia, who have been bitter enemies for a long time, and efforts to overcome their enmity, insofar as the United States made such efforts, were clearly unsuccessful.
And it also shows, too, that the U.S. government didn't really care about peace because they like the war profit, right? For the military industrial complex. It just goes to show you the United States government, did they really try to create some type of peace in reference to that situation? China was able to walk in just like that and say, all right, let's wrap this shit up. I mean, it's just the way it was done. Just the way it was done. Iran, come here. Saudi Arabia, get over here. Both of you are in timeout till you work this shit out. Just like that. Just like that. So, yeah, it was very telling.
The Chinese did it. They have now exchanged ambassadors, and the secondary and tertiary consequences of peace between those two countries are playing themselves out in the headlines every day. Why is this important? Well, the symbolism could not be stronger. The United States, which liked to position itself as global hegemon, global peacemaker, if possible, has now been challenged by another country playing that role in the same tumultuous Middle East where the United States fancied itself in that role. It now has to share the spotlight if it doesn't lose the spotlight altogether. But beyond the symbolism of peacemaker, there's something else going on here. The fact is that over the last 30 to 40 years, we've had, relatively speaking, peace. Yes, we've had wars. The war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and so on. But these wars were well localized, mostly in Asia, not only, but mostly, but localized. In the general global perspective, these were decades of peace. And the Chinese are acutely aware that their rise from a poor third world country with the added burden of being the most populous country in the world, that their incredibly rapid ascendancy to being the great competitive challenger of the United States took place over 40 years of relative, globally speaking, peace.
There you go.
They want the peace because it has worked very well for them.
I hope everybody takes note of that. That may be something to write down. Because it just seems like with the United States, with us, is like, when have we really wanted peace? Not us personally, but our government. You know, every time you turn around, the U.S. government has their hand in another country and they're just escalating things. They're escalating tensions. They're making things worse and more difficult than they were before they showed up on the scene. You know, it's like the United States government, it's like the annoying, uncle. Everybody has that one annoying uncle that just shows up to the cookout. For those of you who don't have cookouts, shows up to dinner, but just shows up to the cookout and everybody knows that they're gonna cause a scene. And it's like everybody kind of tolerates them because they're part of the family, but at the same time, they get on everyone's nerve and everything's going great at the cookout until they show up. And then they show up and they make things worse that shouldn't be worse. They point out obvious tensions that people are trying to hide and, they make it apparent to people. That's like the United States government. The United States government is like the drunk, annoying uncle. I don't know how else to put it.
They did not have to disturb their own economy by going on to a wartime footing. They did not have to debit their own economy to move militarily around the world. They don't have foreign bases. They didn't create any. They didn't have foreign adventures. They didn't create any. They could and did devote themselves to economic development with a kind of focus that has something to do with the extraordinary performance they have shown us. They have become, ironically, advocates of an open world economy, of globalizing continuously. Here's the irony some of you should enjoy. On the one hand, the term neoliberalism and the term globalization went hand in hand over the last 30 to 40 years.
Here we go.
They were the ideological way of saying how happy Western capitalists were in the United States, in Europe, in Japan, with the arrival for them of a vast new cheap labor force. It's a capitalist dream. China was bringing its enormous population and presenting them to global mega corporations, capitalists. Here, come to China, and in a lesser extent, come to India, come to Brazil, and you will have very hardworking people who are willing to accept much lower wages, and that will be a profit bonanza for you. And it was. The last 30 to 40 years, our stock market booms in the Western capitalist area.
Mm-hmm.
But while that boom for the West was the driving force, China was making its own way forward.
While we were, enjoying the cheap and sometimes free sweatshop labor that was occurring in countries in the global South, during that time, China was creeping its way forward and beginning to offer something else. So this is very true. I'm not going to play the whole video. It's a long video. That's why I'm going to play the whole thing. But let me just let him finish what he's saying here, and then I'll tell you the name of the video.
Using the neoliberal globalist arguments of an open economy, of having capitalists come to China to produce there what they would ship back to their own countries. China became the producer for the world. China's manufacturing exploded.
Yep.
China did better with neoliberalism and globalization than the West, who invented those words and who invented the thrust into that part of the world for reasons of profit maximization.
And what people have to understand and take this with you tonight is that if the U.S. decided back during that time to not be greedy, to continue to produce everything here in America, made in America, to keep the workers that they have, if those CEOs wouldn't have become greedy and decided to, let's try to make these parts in other countries like China, let's send those jobs overseas to China because it'll be cheaper for us, but I'll make more money. If that had never happened, we would be in a different country today. But that did happen. It did happen. And China took advantage of that situation and said, sure, bring your labor over here. Yeah, sure. We'll make these parts and these products for you. And while the US government or the United States, the capitalists and the CEOs, all of them here kind of turned their head and went on about their life and counted their stacks of money, over those 30 to 40 years, China was building an empire. Now, here we are in 2023, and they're trying to figure out, how can we get manufacturing back to the level it was in this country after they sent the jobs away? And so the way I see it is, you can't sit here and be angry with China for taking advantage of an opportunity that presented itself to them. And that's exactly what's happening. So you have people who are really angry. They're mad. They say you should fear China. Very, very, very good video. There's other issues he discusses in this video, so I really do think you should watch the whole thing when you get time. It's called Global Capitalism, the Changing World Economy. Definitely check that out. That's Richard Wolff. Let me show you, because they show it here. I thought it said in the description. It's always different when I look at this on the computer versus my phone. Okay. Yeah, the topics he covers: the changing world economy, BRICS outgrow the G7, global de-dollarization speeds up, China's economic strategy, and U.S. people versus leaders on changing world economy. This is a really, really, really good episode. If you have not seen any of them from Democracy Now!, you definitely want to watch that one. Someone reminded me, it was on my to-do list. Someone reminded me of that last night on Call-In. So I definitely wanted to talk about that tonight. But yeah, you've been warned. All three of the things we've talked about in the row: the public banking, we need to move away from the central banks. We talked about what's happening in Brazil with Lula meeting Maduro and all the leaders in South America coming together and trying to see if they have some type of common ground and how they can move forward economically. And then we just listened to Richard Wolff tell you about the US dollar and what's happening in the global market, and if something could replace it within our lifetime. And it looks like it's on that way. So we need to pay attention to what's happening. And now we're going to get into the next story, which is also connected. And this is in reference to the Supreme Court. Now, I want you to see this because Workers Strike Back actually tweeted this out. The Supreme Court just ruled 8-1 in favor of the bosses in the anti-union case, Glacier NW versus Teamsters. The court majority, including Obama appointees, have shamefully made it easier for bosses to sue unions for the economic losses to businesses when workers go on strike. Let me highlight this piece right here. Including 2 Obama appointees. And that just reiterates what I've continued to tell you over and over again, which is that it doesn't matter what political party they're a part of. All of them back capital. All of them back big business. And in this particular case, the Supreme Court justices, except for one, all agreed to back big business over the workers. Why is this important? I'm going to get into the details in just a second. This is important because as much as I have been a supporter of unions, a supporter of trying to unionize, I've continued to tell you that at the end, that should not be the end game. The ultimate goal should be worker co-ops. And this case in particular is a perfect example of why we need that to happen. So I want to go to this article here from NPR. Unions are relieved as the Supreme Court leaves the right to strike intact. First of all, shame on you to NPR for even leading with such a BS title. This is NPR trying to make a bad thing sound like a good thing. Just because the Supreme Court didn't take away the right to strike, that doesn't change the fact that they ruled in favor of big business against the workers, and the workers can still be penalized for going on strike. So shame on you to NPR for even leading with this whack ass title. You should have known better. Let's go on. There's the Supreme Court there. By an 8-1 vote, the High Court ruled against unionized truck drivers who walked off the job, leaving their trucks loaded with wet concrete. But it preserved the rights of the workers to time their strikes for maximum effect. You see how they're wording this? They don't want you to think that this is still an injustice that's done to the workers. Virtually every strike is based on timing that will hurt the employer, said Stanford Law School professor William Gould, a former chairman of the National Labor Relations Board. And there was a great concern that the court would rule broadly to limit the rights of strikers. But that did not happen, he noted in an interview to NPR. You see how this is going? At first glance, the Supreme Court did seem poised to issue a decision more damaging to unions. Thursday's ruling followed 3 earlier decisions against labor in the last 5 years, including one that reversed a 40-year-old precedent. And the truckers' case posed the possibility that the court would overturn another long-standing precedent dating back nearly 70 years. So labor feared the worst, a decision that would hollow out the right to strike. Thursday's decision, however, was a narrow ruling that generally left strike protections intact. Look at the vocabulary. Generally, narrow. This is to make it sound like it was less of a blow than what it was. The case was brought by Glacier Northwest, a cement company in Washington state, against the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. After the union's contract had expired and negotiations broke down, the union signaled its members to walk off the job after its drivers had loaded that day's wet concrete into Glacier delivery trucks. The company sued the union in state court, claiming the truck drivers had endangered company equipment. Wet concrete, it explained, hardens easily, and the company had to initiate emergency maneuvers to offload the concrete before it destroyed the trucks. This is an example here that just shows you had endangered company equipment, that these companies and the Supreme Court care more about property than people. Let that sink in. They care more about property than people. Because you see, property can be replaced. And I find it very hard to believe that a company like Glacier Northwest can't replace the property, can't replace equipment either. I hope everybody sees the writing on the wall with that. But the Washington Supreme Court ruled that Glacier's complaint should have been filed with the National Labor Relations Board. For nearly 70 years, the Supreme Court has said that federal law gives the board the authority to decide labor disputes as long as the conduct is even arguably protected or prohibited under the federal labor law. The business community was gunning for and hoping to eliminate that rule, but it didn't get its way. Again, see how they're trying to frame this? They're lying to you in this article by making it seem like the business community didn't win here. This was a win for the company. The Teamsters Union lost. And so here's NPR. The business community didn't get its way. My, how the mighty have fallen. I remember NPR used to actually be good. This was a case of winning a relatively minor battle, but losing the war. The High Court did not overturn or otherwise disturb its long-standing rule, giving the NLRB broad authority in labor disputes, leaving unions free to time when they will strike. Here's the problem. Leaving unions free to time when they will strike. Why would they not be free to do that? Let's stop pretending like this is some bonus that was given to the union. You should be able to do that regardless. Oh, but it ruled in their favor. They didn't win, but it's okay because it gives them the ability to be free to time their strike. You're supposed to be able to do that anyway. You know, it's like, I hope people can read through the lines with this article. At the same time, the court's majority decided the case in favor of the company in a very fact-specific way. I'm going to show you who wrote this article in a second. This is a hot mess. Very fact-specific way. The court ultimately said the union's conduct in this particular case posed a serious and foreseeable risk of harm to Glacier's trucks. Again, risk of harm to Glacier's trucks. Once again, showing you they care more about property than people. And because of this intentional harm, so let's pretend there was no intentional harm that was done to the people. That's why they walked off the job. Because of this intentional harm, the case should not have been dismissed by the state Supreme Court. Though the court's vote was 8-1, breakdown of opinions was more complicated. Here we go here about the justices. Yada, yada, yada. The court's 3 most conservative justices wrote separately to express frustrations that the court did not go further and reverse a lot of the protections for striker rights. Justice Alito virtually invited Glacier or other businesses' interests to come back and try again. You guys see this? Writing for the dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown argued the union acted lawfully in timing its strike to put maximum pressure on the employer, pointing out that Glacier could have locked out the workers or had non-union workers on standby in the event of a strike to prevent any surprise strike timing. There are 27 cases still to be decided by the court as it enters what is usually the final month of the court term. And many of those cases will be highly controversial. In Thursday's case, though, the court quite deliberately took a pass. If there is to be a major retreat on long guaranteed labor rights, it will not be this term, and labor leaders were relieved. You see this? Relieved. Labor leaders were relieved. Now, does this sound relieved to you? The court majority, including 2 Obama appointees, have shamefully made it easier for bosses to sue unions for the economic losses to businesses when workers go on strike. And this is exactly why, you see what I mean? They can sue you now. This is exactly why unions cannot be the end game. And I like Workers Strike Back. I love the things that they're trying to do, creating a workers movement across the country. I went to the Workers Strike Back launch here in Boston. Totally get it. Totally support unions. But even there, one of the things that I said is that this needs to develop into worker co-ops. Now, I didn't get to speak there because I got there a little bit late. But in talking to people, that's what I said, like, worker co-ops should be the end game. And this case that just happened here with the Supreme Court is a perfect example as to why unionizing should not be your end game. That's a great first step. But the end game should be a worker co-op so that you own it. The Supreme Court can just come in and make decisions on behalf of the company and support the company. They are not going to back the workers. Because again, what this case has shown you is that they consider property to be more valuable than people. So they are not going to decide in the workers' favor. And since you don't own the company, you're a part of the union, but you don't own anything. You don't own a piece of the company. You have to go along with the company's rules, or you have to go work somewhere else. And this is why it is incredibly important that once you do the unionizing part, you move on to that next step, which is turning these unions into worker cooperatives. And that should be the end game. It's not enough just to start a union. And I'm sorry, I know some people disagree with me about that, but I'm going to keep it real to you. Look at what just happened. The way that they can just come in. And you can betcha, going forward, there's other cases. Going forward, they are going to side with the company because, again, they back big business. They back the businesses that back the property, and neither one of them back the people. And that's how it works. So one of the reasons why I continue to tell you, check out Democracy at Work. Richard Wolff, Democracy at Work. They have a whole website and a whole channel where they talk about worker cooperatives. They have a whole step-by-step process on their website where they explain to you how to do it. But we should never just get to the point where we're like, yay, we have a union, woohoo! Because look at what happened with some of the Starbucks stores. They formed a union, and then what? Then what? Howard Schultz and them came in and said, okay, we're going to close down this location. Now what? And there's nothing you can do because you don't own it. And that's the big difference. We got to talk more about this on the show. We got to talk more about it because it's very important, you guys. Don't sell yourself. I don't want to say sell yourself short, but don't just get to that point and say, okay, this is it. This is good enough. I'm all right. Because as soon as you're just all right, you see what happens. And Teamsters have been around for a long time. Also speaks to another issue is where we need to take some of this power away from the Supreme Court. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Watch it, Lula. Remember what happened to Gaddafi when he tried to do a continental currency based on his gold deposits. We don't want you running through the street with NATO allies torturing you and shoving shards of glass up your beep. Sabs, you can tell them about Lula, but most will ask how you're going to help me make rent, child support, and car note. This is true. Joe ain't even trying to get us back into Iran deal, leaving door wide open for China to sweep right in. Then gets Boris to talk to Zelensky or talk Zelensky out of a peace deal with Putin. Meanwhile, they're forming a global co-op or global coup among nations instead. Watching clown shows on Fox say capitalism lifted more out of poverty than anything else. Lived experience thwarts that. You peeing on me saying it's lemonade don't work when I smell piss. Notice how in the search, Google made sure to elevate NPR. See how the corporation watches each other's back. Okay, so let's stop playing around with these private sector unions. There will be no making unions strong, then transitioning co-op. They just cut the legs out from under us, people. It's time to just bypass unionization and go straight to cooperation. Co-ops replace corporations, unions, keep. Okay, I don't know what happened there. I think it said keep corpse in place. I don't know what's going on. Oh, okay. Co-ops replace corporations. Unions keep corps in place. Okay, I'll come back to that. Okay. Thank you for this tip. Join and donate to the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Do a citizen ballot initiative to charter a public bank that creates a lending program specifically to lend to startup cooperatives and for workers to purchase the company from the owners. Thank you so much for that, Roger. So this is a big thing. This is a big deal. We need to own it. Douglas says, new future trade example, Mexico/China, 1/3 pesos, 1/3 yuan, 1/3 new BRICS currency, ? Douglas said, oligarchs sent our jobs to China and they kept them. Bryce says, Professor Wolff is really good. Yeah. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. With co-op ownership, worker/owners won't outsource. There you go. There you go. Okay, we are getting to the AOC Town Hall story tonight. So I don't know if all of you know about this, but yes, AOC did have another town hall. And Jose, who you guys are familiar with, he's intervened at a lot of these town halls, not just AOC's, but other warmonger town halls. But Jose and Lucy is from Indie News Network. They have been banned. They got there. They had registered ahead of time to attend the town hall, only to get there and to find out that they were banned from the event. Guess because they were asking questions that AOC did not like. She doesn't actually want to talk to people who agree with her. She only wants to talk to people that agree with her. She does not want to talk to people who disagree with her. So much to the point where she will ban them from attending her town hall. This is where we're at now. But it didn't seem to matter because even though Jose and Lucy were not there to call out AOC on her ridiculousness, other people in the audience that are her constituents did not seem to be feeling AOC. And they had some things to say similar to what Jose and Lucy have been complaining about as well. What was important about this is the fact that it shows you that other people in her district are seeing her for what she really is. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. He starts off with the Freedom Caucus about the debt deal and then jumps into AOC constituents upset about her voting for war funding. Let's get into this.
Watch that and watch Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez heckled at her town hall in Queens, New York about government debt spending. Watch this.
It has historic reductions in spending, consequential reforms that will lift people out of poverty into the workforce, rein in government overreach. There are no new taxes, no new government programs. All the Democrats are very upset. But one thing Hakeem told me, there's nothing in the bill for them. There's not one thing in the bill for Democrats.
The American people now, the government is...
Oh, I can skip past him. I'm sorry. Oh, I probably shouldn't have done that with the Twitter video. Oh, no. I'm sorry, guys. Let me come out. I do hate this about Twitter videos because they just spin. It's really annoying. Let me do this again. Whee! All right, let's see if I can just...
30% bigger than it was pre-COVID. Let's go back to pre-COVID levels of spending. That's what we asked for. We're not. This deal doesn't do that.
We should eliminate the debt limit in the United States.
You claim that you voted for. If you would like to call the Congressman's office, if you would like to meet the Congressman.
Speaker McCarthy should pull this bad.
This part right here, where she said, my community needs that money. Look at this. This is her town hall. $100 billion for Ukraine that you voted for.
You voted for. If you would like to call the Congressman's office.
there are a lot of communities that need help and need that money. You see, more people are starting to see it now. More people are starting to see it. Let me make sure I go. They're talking about the debt ceiling there. So let me come out of that. I do have those other videos. I want to show you this as well. So again, this was Jose telling people last night at AOC's Town Hall. Rachel George, a good friend of mine, asked AOC, why not use the influence of the squad to tell people not to vote for Biden unless he ends this war in Ukraine? Maybe Jamal Bowman should consider that. And that's actually a really good point. But what was interesting to me is that even though they banned Jose and Lucy, you didn't need Jose and Lucy there to get those same points across because other people are still upset with her about it. That's the thing. What is AOC going to do? Ban everyone? She going to block everyone from attending her town halls that disagree with her, that bring up the war in Ukraine? She never answers that question, by the way. They won't even talk about it. They just, the squad, we were just talking about this. They just hosted an event that they charge money to people for people to attend, just to tell people the same shit that they've been saying all along. And to also tell people they have to drag Joe Biden across the finish line. Nothing about this war. They're still not answering the questions. And I believe some of these people are controlled opposition. Let me make something very clear to you. Some of the same people who are anti-war activists that are willing to call out Joe Biden and hold up these signs and protest in front of Anthony Blinken and all of these other people, all of a sudden when the squad has this event, they say that they're hanging with the squad, not protesting the squad about this war. Now, I'm not going to say any names on here, but if you were on Twitter, you know who I'm talking about. But some of these organizations that say they're so anti-war, all of a sudden, when it comes to the squad, and I've seen this happen before, they are nice to them. All of a sudden, all the end the war and stop the war in Ukraine and stop the military industrial complex, all those posters like they like to hold up all the damn time. All of a sudden, when the squad is present, they ain't got no damn posters. They're not saying stop the war in Ukraine. They're not interrupting them when they're speaking. And they're quoting on Twitter, telling people that they're hanging out with the squad. Some of these people are controlled opposition. And I've been saying this shit for a while. You tell me, how is it that some of these organizations are able to get into the halls of Congress all the damn time to protest and interrupt speeches, and other activist groups can't even walk in the front door? Make it make sense. I'm calling all of it out. Some of y'all mofos are controlled. I know it. I know it. So listen to what this woman says about the war in Ukraine at AOC's Town Hall.
I have a question right now. Why don't you and the squad have the ability to tell their supporters not to vote for Biden unless he concedes on ending this war? Why won't you do it? That's a lot of money you are sending to Ukraine. And you're talking about you're bringing money to your community? What about the war? She don't even want to answer the question. She's draining. She is contributing.
So there's AOC back there. Oh, by the way, they were handing out those military recruitment flyers at this town hall again, too, by the way. And her name was on the flyer. Yep.
Into America's debt. You are contributing to America. You got a lot of blood on your hands, and you're going to have to answer to God one day. You're going to have to answer to God one day. Just believe that, girl. You keep clapping and smiling. You're going to have to answer to God. Stop funding the Ukraine war, sweetheart. Say you for the people. You a damn lie. You a damn lie. You are not the truth. You are being brainwashed. I need y'all to wake the hell up. If COVID-19 did not wake you up, then you are asleep. Why you letting this lady rock yourself to sleep? Stop funding this war.
The point that she made, one of the points that she made in that video that I thought was so important. Why not use the influence of the squad to tell people not to vote for Joe Biden unless he helps end the war in Ukraine? I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. That's a good point. Why not do that? You know the sad part about this video? There's other ones I'm going to show you as well. But watch this. I just want to go to, put it on mute. I just want to go, I want you to take a look at the crowd. Let me jump back for a second. Let's take a look at the crowd. The young girl in the front. Hold on. Let me see if it'll go there. Right here. The girl right here who turns around and looks back. And then the black girl right here. What bothered me is that they looking back at her like what's wrong with her, when in reality, they should be giving AOC that look. Because what she's saying is correct. And see, AOC, and I said this before, AOC, this was just a pawn. You see, she checked off all the boxes in reference to keeping people in the Democratic Party, recruiting people for the military industrial complex through these military academies, and part of her district, the Bronx. You see, she checked off all the boxes. Let's get this Latina woman. Oh, but she needs to be very smart. Yeah, it needs to be a woman. It needs to be a person of color, but they also need to be really intelligent. Let's go with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let's push her through Justice Democrats. Because see, she can still go back to the hood in the Bronx and she can still say, I'm one of you, even though she's not. She can still pretend like she is. From day one, I was just a bartender. This was all a joke. All a joke set up from the very beginning. It was on purpose that she was given more attention than the other candidates that ran in Justice Democrats. They heavily promoted AOC more because, like I said, she checked off all the boxes. So that's what people have to understand. Now, there's another video as well. Let me go ahead and share this one from her town hall where more people bringing up the war. Here we go.
So, sorry, sir, we're taking lines. Sir, we're taking lines. Sir, we're having people write their names on the piece of paper.
American citizens before migrants.
Okay, so he has the issue with the migrant issue. Now, he has on a Cuba shirt. What you have to understand is there is escalating tensions that are happening in cities like New York and Chicago in the country right now, where other people who were born and raised in this country are starting to feel some kind of way because they feel like their cities are offering a lot of money or packages to migrants that have immigrated into the United States and just like crossed the border, and their communities are still broke and poor, and their elected officials, their local elected officials, have not helped them out at all. So there's escalating tension there. And me didn't want to have that conversation. I'd want to do it as a panel, so we can hear both sides. But that's what he's upset about. And then we'll get to the other individual.
Don't you touch me. Don't touch me. Get your hands off. Get your hands off me. Where are you on the migrant issue? You're absent. American citizen. You're throwing veterans out of this country. Where are you? You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit.
Who is that guy? By the way, that guy comes back. The boo guy, he comes back. I think he's also controlled opposition. Hold on.
Veterans out of this country. Where are you? You're a piece of shit.
You know what's sad about this? I understand where he's coming from, that I guess she's not being vocal about this issue, yada, yada. He's part of her district. I get it. She's not around. I get that too. But you know what's really sad about this particular issue with the migrant situation? It's the fact that at the end of the day, we've been taught now, since the economy is really getting to people's wallets are being, pinched, and we're going into summer, it's starting to get hot, people about to lose their shit. Let's just keep it real. And you have inflation. Instead of people blaming the billionaires, blaming the oligarchs, blaming the people at the top, blaming these banks, people are starting to blame each other. People are starting to blame. Everybody got to have a scapegoat now. This is what happens when capitalism starts to squeeze onto you tighter and tighter. So now you have people like, they're blaming the migrants, or they're blaming their neighbor, or it's a black person's fault, it's a white person's fault. They're blaming the LGBTQ community. Everybody has like this scapegoat instead of pointing their fingers at the number one issue, and that's the people at the very top. Let's get back to the guy who's booing. That guy right there, that guy is a trip. He's something else.
Okay.
What's funny about that? See how she's just laughing? Okay. But she doesn't address the issue that he was upset about.
The president has come out saying that he also believes that he has this authority. What he has also said is that he is not sure if he is able to implement the authority in time for the June 5th deadline. And so that is where we see kind of this impasse. I still believe, first of all, that we should start to implement it anyway, because we should eliminate the debt limit in the United States because of the constitutional.
Yeah, but I think it's gotten to the point now. I'm telling you, you guys think I'm joking. Like, summer heat is about to kick off soon. It's June now, so we're still okay. But when July comes around and it gets really hot, people start to lose their shit. Like, I'm just being honest with you. It's not just Chicago. Those of us up in these cities, the northern cities, people start to lose their shit once July hits. Every year this happens. So it's great that for you to get up there and say, I don't think we should have a debt limit, yada, yada. But at this point in time, people don't really want to hear what you think should not happen. It's getting to that point where people want you to make something either happen, or they want you to prevent something from happening. And if you mark my words, wait until July. If you think people are angry now, and if you've ever lived in New York City, especially during the summertime in July, people are going to lose their shit. People lose their shit here in Boston too. So people don't want to hear that anymore. People are timed out. People don't want to hear about what should be, or in an ideal world, it will be like this. Nobody wants to hear that. If you are their elected official, they want to know what you're doing, and they want you to do your damn job. And it is very clear to your constituents, particularly to the ones who are working class and not the bougie peeps, like, just keeping it real, not the bougie PMCs, but particularly the ones that are working class. They can see clear as day that you're not doing your damn job. And you didn't just get there. You've been there for a while now. And some of them are seeing that you played people. Let's just keep it real. Here comes the other one.
You claim that you voted for.
And I will share something. I don't like that Republicans passed a 1.7 trillion tax cut on the wealthiest people in this country.
What does that have to do with you voting to send billions of dollars to Ukraine? This is something AOC does quite often. She'll pivot back to Republicans so that she doesn't have to actually speak to what she did.
That we continue to report on the military budget. I don't like that we have enormous amounts of...
You did not ask the question! It is not your turn! I thought you wait!
Who is this? Who is this, guys? Is this a stand? Is this what stands do? Is this a stand? Like it, you know, who goes out this hard for someone they don't even know? You know, is he a plant? Was that guy planted there? Is that what this is supposed to be?
Freedom of speech!
You see what's happening? What I tell you when I say people starting to lose it, and it's just June. It's just June. People are calling each other idiots. See how they're mad at each other instead of being mad at the real problem and the real issue? It's going to be a hot Bronx summer.
That is exactly why we use paper slips.
You see the sign? America first, vetted and legal. What? I can't see. I think that's legal migrants only. Stop funding Ukraine. You see what's happening? Honey, stay inside this summer. His sign says, stop lying. Stop lying.
So next, we're going to go with
Okay, that piece, which I should be getting into that one. Let's hear her speech.
So next, we're going to go with
nuclear war with Russia. We're sending F-16. If we send F-16s, we're on the verge of nuclear war. It's not okay. Are you going to stop this war? Okay, are you going to stop this war? That's my question. Are we going to?
Yeah, we know about the paper.
Yeah, we know about the paper. Why are you afraid of your constituents?
Like, who is this? Like, what are you, man? Look what happened to this guy. Now he got Band-Aids on his knees. I think this is a wrap. Is that a wrap around his leg? Like an athletic wrap like you would use? I was a football trainer in high school. We used to wrap people's, that looks like it looks like ankle tape. So he's got his leg wrapped. I don't know what happened to him before he got there. He has Band-Aids on his knee. And this guy, this is a plant man. Desert man just says, boo. This is a plant man. Come on. No way. No way. But she's mad about the war in Ukraine.
Get out of here.
Because it has.
Love it. AOC is an obvious criminal. Love it. Love it. Keeping it real. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Didn't mean to do that. All right, let's go back.
Your constituent.
Why did he have to say it like that? Boo!
Because it has been creating a lot of harm to poor and indigenous people.
Okay, so those were a few, But there's another one I wanted to show you as well. Now, this is Roger Meadows. Shout out to Roger for keeping it real and doing the damn thing. He actually talked to people outside of the town hall. So it says interviews by Roger at AOC's Town Hall event, and Indie News Network was able to capture this. So listen to this.
You want to say your name? You can. You don't if you don't want to. But what you were just saying?
Oh, so basically today at this AOC Town Hall, all she was talking about heat pumps, air conditioners, and how to get a passport. She was not talking about the crime. 3 people got stabbed in Junction Boulevard on May 13th. She didn't talk about that.
Okay.
It's constant crime on the transit system.
Okay.
It's crazy.
What else were your concerns?
That's all the crime.
Okay.
The crime.
So she mainly said that AOC was talking about how to get a passport, like that type of stuff, not really addressing the issues.
And then the migrant situation, of course.
See?
When we have our homeless Americans on the street, but when they come in, they just put them in front of them, which I think, like, where was this money for the Americans that are homeless? Where was it? But now they have money for, the migrants.
You guys see people starting to see it.
You want to say anything?
Yeah, she's a liar. Okay.
What, she's a liar?
No, absolutely not. This was not a liar. No, I'm upset because I've been working on a project, but with the illegals, and I've been working very hard this past month with the footage that I have and what I've uncovered. In fact, I'm going to be on a show next week to expose it all with some very high-profile people, and I want to make one thing clear, and I always do. I am not against anybody. We are all God's children. But come here the right way. Do not come here illegally, because the word is out through their app all over 140 countries. Go to New York, go to America. Everything is free. Now, a lot of them have come in with very fancy phones that have not been given by the government. The majority of them are getting phones, but there's a lot of them that have come in with highlights. They're certainly not underfed. Designer clothes, designer watches, okay? I mean, really. And yet you're complaining about the food, you're trashing the hotels, you don't like the food you're being served, which is great food. We have Americans and New Yorkers. Sir, when I see a New Yorker pick the garbage for food, I break down and cry. I will go to some places, gourmet places that are closing, and I ask them if I may take the food that they're going to throw out to people on the street. And I'll walk around, and you would think you gave them $1 million because $20 salads, beautiful sandwiches, soups. These are human beings, and this mayor's not looking out for the New York people.
The homeless situation is a big issue. We've talked about how it is in Los Angeles. It's an issue in New York as well, but it's just continuing to increase. Obviously, this leads back to the poverty issue. And from what I've heard from people that live in New York City, Eric Adams is not handling this situation well. And so the point I think that these two women are making is that you have all these homeless people that, cop Mayor Adams basically wanted to lock up. But when the migrants were dropped off, and they were dropped off in New York City, it was like, okay, let's find them shelter, housing, let's help them. And what they're saying is, why wasn't that same opportunity being presented to the homeless people in New York City? So it's just, I'm telling you, July is going to be hot summer.
And the military, as a daughter of a wonderful man who stormed the beach in Normandy at age 16, 6'2", my father, long before I was born. And every time he heard the national anthem when I was growing up, he'd stand up with his hand on his heart and his eyes would water, and I'd say, "Daddy, don't cry." And he said to me, "It takes a true man to cry." These are our veterans, our military that fought for me and you to be free. And that son of a gun in there wants to cut the budget for the military when it's already depleted. Sir, I'm telling you.
No, honey, it ain't depleted. I think Roger gets to this point, but it's definitely not depleted. I don't know where she heard that from. But the defense budget is over $860 billion. So it's definitely not depleted. If anything, it could be depleted, but have to interject there.
It's not good. The Democrats want to keep people down. They want to throw them breadcrumbs. They don't do anything to help them get back up with their situation. Now, I do realize some are catastrophic, cost a lot of money, but we're spending billions of dollars on the illegals. Help those that you can. Bring them up.
So what I've seen is one of the reasons why we protest her is because she's funding the military. Now, here's the thing, and I want you to think about this. I want you to separate caring for those soldiers who come back, separate that from us financing the military-industrial complex, which is consistently putting us in these wars. You see what I'm saying? A lot of times we are financing these wars not for our benefit, but for Lockheed and Martin, but for, what's the other one? Raytheon, okay? To do nothing but put us in danger. They put us in danger, and then they don't want to take care of us when they come back. So this is the reason why military recruitment is down, because the high schoolers, they're looking at what happened to the millennials when they got lied into the Iraq war, and they're like, I don't want none of that.
There you go. Bingo. Ding, 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 ding. The last, I think, strong effort for military recruitment was my generation. Millennials. I think that was the last strongest effort for it. They haven't done well with Gen Z population. So, yeah.
They also realize, and I've talked to many, that Biden is in bed with the Ukrainian government, which you well know. I don't even need to get into that, okay? And the money has been laundered over there. We don't see.
We don't know where it's going.
We don't know where.
Well, it's funny. It's the Nazis. The Ukrainian Nazis.
Yeah, because they wear
that thing. Yeah.
Now Putin's a bad guy, and we know that. But he lied about Putin. I forget which thing it was. It was major. And finally, it was Tucker Carlton who exposed it. Tucker Carlton exposed it. He said that the president of the Ukraine lied, and they exposed it. One of many, many lies. I mean, look. Biden has destroyed our country in many ways, and you know that. And I got very angry sitting there listening to her lies when I know the real deal. And those poor people in there, a lot of them, I'm sure they're all wonderful people, but they're seeing, our food stamps are going to be cut, and this is going to be cut. I don't want them to be cut for those that really need it. They deserve it. The illegals don't. But if you can work, you should want to work for self-worth, to be independent from the government that wants to keep you down. You know that.
I hear you.
I hope I didn't yell at you, because I didn't know.
No. I'm good. I agree with a lot. I disagree with some, but that's okay.
That's why we're Americans.
Exactly.
Is that right? We're not a communist country yet.
All right, you have a good one. What was your name?
I'm Susan Miller. I'm an activist for many years.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. And you?
Roger. Meadows.
What's your last name?
Meadows.
Huh?
Meadows.
Well, it's very nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you.
So that was an interesting, conversation, an interesting discussion. I agree with her on some issues, and some of the other issues I was kind of like, I don't know about all that. But shout out to Roger for being on the ground and being able to get that footage. There's one more I have too. I have to go into my DMs to capture, so I'm sorry. But someone in the chat said she gave them reformed Karen vibes. You guys are so funny. I can't look at the chat right now. I can't. But it's important that we have these conversations with people and we don't just write people off. Now, what if Roger would have been like, oh, I don't want to talk to you because your opinion about the migrants coming here, I don't want to talk to you about that. You know what I mean? But no, Roger still decided to have the conversation with her. And I think that's important. So I think we need to be open to having these discussions with people. Now, where's that video? Here we go. Yeah. All right. I found it. There's one more This is a very quick one that he had outside as well. A younger woman, but she sees the writing on the wall too. She's starting to see AOC for what she really is. So let me go ahead and share this one. This one's really good as well.
You know, I sat there and I listened to AOC talk a whole lot of nonsense about Republicans doing this, Republicans doing that. What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't give a crap about the Republicans. What are you
Feel
doing?
free to curse if you want.
No, I don't curse.
Liar. Keep going.
I don't.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So, I don't know. AOC says she's doing stuff. She sounds like a 2-year-old talking about economics, and then her supporters are being brainwashed to sleep for some odd reason. All you gotta do is pick up a book and read. Shout out to Thomas Sowell. He's a real one right there. That's all she gotta do. And all she's doing is rocking these people to sleep.
I agree with you with everything except for the Thomas Sowell part.
You don't like Thomas Sowell?
Nah. But check
no,
this out.
he's a smart dude.
Well, I'm not saying he's not smart.
He's a very smart. I'm not saying you gotta agree with everything.
Yeah.
But he's really
Oh,
smart.
you know what? All right, so you want to give your name? If not, don't worry about it.
I have no social media anyway, so.
But people are waking up. People are starting to see it. Heard what she said. That's right. Deneen said, speak the truth. Exactly. She's always talking about the Republicans, this Republican, that. And that young woman said, no, what are you doing though? Everybody wants to point their fingers at someone else instead of looking at what they may be doing. And I think that's important. But I think more people are starting to wake up. Man, what a town hall, huh? Boo! Boo! How did he do it? How did he do it, guys? Boo! Thank you for the super sticker. Want to see more? Isaac says AOC is there to manufacture consent. There you go. Thank you for the super chat, Lorez. Great show, Sabrina. More and more. I'm of AOC. Thank you for that. Java the Cat says, thank you for doing this, Roger. Yeah, Roger, you kicked butt out there. Roger Meadows, man on the street. Not trying to, tempt you, Roger, but just saying, man on the street. Bryce says, the right are easier to talk to than liberals. And Jay said, where'd you get those nice bracelets, Sabby? Oh, you noticed those? These little guys, you like? See, I got it from this site called Tamar. I don't know if that's Tamar. Let me show you because I don't know how you pronounce this. But anyway, these people, they contacted me. Oh, damn. I think I'm spelling the name wrong. What is the name of this? I thought it was Tamar. Let me see. They contacted me and asked me if I wanted to do something with them. And I didn't respond. But I did see. Is it not Tamar? Why can't it? Tuma? Oh my God. Like seriously, it came yesterday. Why don't I remember the name of these people? Oh man, this is bad. Does someone know this in the chat? Timu! Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad you guys do. I got it from Timu. Yeah, kind of cute, huh? This is a tree. I don't know if you guys can see that well. You guys see that well? Yeah. This is a tree. And I like this little foof there. Yeah, but you guys should check it out, Timu. Yeah. So these people contacted me and I was like, whatever. And so I didn't respond to them, but I did look at their website and I was like, hey, so if you guys ever want to check it out, you should definitely check out their site just because it's really cheap. Really cheap. I'm not kidding. I got 3 shirts. I think altogether it was $35, altogether. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best quality. I'm just going to just keeping it real. But it is very, what? I buy my lady sexy lingerie from Temu. That is interesting. Interesting. I learn new things about you guys all the time. Sebastian, is Temu ethical? I don't know. I should probably check that, right? I should probably check that. I should look into that. Temu, this might be the last buy, bud. I gotta check your to see who you guys are. I don't know. Temu. Temu. Uh-oh, I don't know where it went. Temu. I'll show it to you guys. Maybe one of you might know if it's ethical or not. Because I don't know. It's addictive, like, you know, if you're really just trying to look and you're not thinking about buying anything, don't go on there. Because see, you can spin to win. Let me see. Well, let me add Temu. Spin to win $100 coupon bundle. Watch me not win anything. I didn't get this offer last time. Hey. Oh, you just missed the. Oh, no. The jackpot. Somebody, I could give this to you guys. I can give it to someone else. You just hit the jackpot. Wait a minute. Ends in. I got to use it now? What the fuck? No, I don't have time. I knew it was a trick. Anyway, Temu. So you guys go here and they have like these lightning deals. They're really cool stuff. Like they have home stuff. But I found like the female stuff on here, like the dresses. Wait. Dresses for women is hot right now. So it's pretty cool. Like I said, look, like this dress is $14.48. This dress is this is $7.64. Look, guys, it's cute. I like this, right? Yeah. It looks scammy, Sebastian. Sebastian, you think it's bad? Oh, no. Oh, no. I probably need to check on this. I'm worried now. Temu is selling overstock surplus products at an extremely lower price. This is another sign of last stage capitalism. Oh, man. It's all made by enslaved Oompa Loompas. Mastermind. What? Oh, no. Thank you for the super chat, Terry. Sabby, I signed the Google form for the barbecue here. Please check it out. Thanks. Thank you so much, Terry. Thanks so much. The deadline for that is June 10th. I'll send out another reminder with my newsletter again for those who didn't sign up for the RBN, the Boston chapter. So I'll send it out again. But after June 10th, I'll reach out to all of you guys that filled it out. And then we'll go ahead from there. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. 3 shirts for $35 says it all, Sabby. Well, I don't know. Like, oh no. Peter goes, the prices are real. I thought it was fake, but it's not. I thought it was fake too at first. But like, yeah, I got these little guys. Baba says Chinese owned marketplace to compete with Amazon. Oh. Okay. Well, you guys can check it out. And I think they have, let me see. They have men on here. I don't know. Like I only saw the women's stuff. Men. Oh. They have for guys too. See, guys? That's actually kind of cool. That shirt's kind of based. I'm not going to lie. I like how it starts with the black and then it kind of fades into the white. I like that fade look. What's the other colors look like? Actually, this may not look. Oh, see, I don't like the green. Oh, that one looks kind of cool. The only thing I will say, sometimes the colors, it might be a little bit different when you get it. So like this color right here, this is military blue. It might be a little bit lighter or a little bit darker when you get it. So just keep that in mind because sometimes those aren't that great. But that's actually kind of cool. That shirt right there for like the dudes. And they have, by the way, and some of you, if you're worried about sizes, they have all the sizes. So, because I know that was probably another question some of you may have had. Like, what kind of sizes do they have? They have a summer sale. Think big this summer. Let's see. Oh, that's a cute shirt. And then they have fake Crocs, you guys. Unisex. Oh, yeah, they're like little fake Crocs. Look at them. They're cute. These are actually kind of cute. Oh, no, I have to get off of here. What am I doing? I need to go. We'll go to the last Rockfin comment. Marvin says, Sabby planning for a career change, HSN. No. Oh, man. Oh, man. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabrina, I love how you peep the Black people that be in the front at those town halls when they turn around and have a big question mark look on their face. Remember when you zeroed in on the senior citizen brother who turned around and was like, what the hell was that about? When Jose called her or Bowman out on the very first Jose and Kynan call out, LOL. Oh, yeah, I remember that. That guy turned around. He was like, what the? Stop telling me about the national debt. Screw that. What are you going to do about my personal debt? Wages still below cost of living. It's narrowing, but not because of anything the government did, but because workers are withholding their labor. Sabrina, you were a football coach. What the hell? Were you tackling people or something? No, I wasn't. LOL, you practice martial arts. Did you power lift also? No, I wasn't a football coach. I was one of the trainers, one of the athletes. So in high school, you had a choice. Like you could be, they called it trainer. I don't know why they called it that, because we weren't actually physically training them, but we were the people who would, like, if they got a hurt ankle, we would wrap their ankle, wrap their leg. Like we were those people. So I was that type of trainer when I was in high school. Yeah, I did that 1 year. So we're the people that would sit on the sidelines during the game. You would see us over there on the benches, but we didn't play with the team. Yeah, it's kind of cool though. It was a fun experience. But these are so cute. All right, guys, I'm gonna ask you, should I get these? And then I'm gonna go. They're $3.97. Oh, wait a minute. The shoe sizes. Oh, they have half sizes. Okay, never mind. Like the baby blue ones, they're really cute. Like for a summer shoe. I don't know. Maybe it just looks cute on her though. You guys ever had that feeling where like it looks cute on someone, but not on you? Maybe it's that thing. Oh, well, I got to get out of here. I'm like addicted. I told you, don't go on that site if you don't want to buy anything. Anywho, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you have a good weekend. I'll be back on Sunday. Enjoy your Saturday. And I hope you learned a lot tonight about public banking and money in this country and the world. So have a good night. Keep up the fight.